right, welcome back to Full Circle with Joyce. And as we jump into our viewpoint discussions today, allow me to introduce my guests in studio right now. I have Ayaz Manji, who's the Director of Programs and Operations at Kenya Red Cross. Welcome to the show.
Morning, Joyce.
And also Solomon Kuria, who's an analyst. Good to have you here as well. And as I did prompt earlier, we're going to be talking about emergency preparedness here in Kenya. But just before we do, let's take a look at some of the things that are trending on social media today. One of the biggest ones is this called World Food Day KE. Today actually marks World Food Day. And I'm just going to pick my guests' brains about this just a little bit as we reflect on this day and what it means. What does agriculture mean too for Kenya? What is the state of food security here in the country as well? Sampling a few of these tweets. Chronicles of the Boy Child, it's Kame posts, agriculture will be key to creating employment for the youth. Agnes Kagure has posted there 3 years ago, a friend posed a challenge to me, a small vegetable garden, oopsie, as I lose that tweet, let's go back to that. A small vegetable garden in your big compound, that could be enough for your family. That got me thinking, and my small vegetable garden has been evergreen since then. We are a farming country. Join the race. The Power World also says agriculture is the backbone of most African nations, yet we're still being faced by food insecurity. Could our methods of production be our main challenge? Interesting pointers there, gentlemen. And just, as Kenyans, what's your own personal take then on the state of agriculture in Kenya? We're hearing, our vegetables. There's now a lot of use of different pesticides and things. Even for you as just consumers, as citizens in this country, how concerned are you about food security currently in Kenya?
That's a concern, I think, Joyce. I don't think that's news as well. It's a concern. We are a food deficit country right now, which we know we import food. At least our staple food is imported. I'm not an expert on it, I can tell you, but what I can tell you is that there's a myriad of factors that lead to these things. From where I sit, yes, the factors that will lead to this is disasters that come about by climate change. We are a cyclical country, from drought to flood, from drought to flood. This makes food production a bit difficult, but there's many other factors to it. There's the complexity of our agricultural methods, education. I remember when I was a child, we used to do the 4K club in school. We would learn how to do agriculture, and you don't see that nowadays with the youth. And we've also lost this feeling with the youth that agriculture is a good way to earn money, which is part of the problem. As long as we have middlemen, running the show, it's never going to be lucrative, and then we kill the farmer. So it's a complex thing, but we are having issue of food security in this country for sure.
Right. And turning to you, Solomon, I think, looking at, we've talked about our climate and our cyclical patterns here in Kenya for a very long time. Is this not something that you feel we could have addressed by now? Like, we know there's probably going to be a drought at some point, or we know that there's going to be floods at some point. Is that something that we should just kind of leave up to weather and Mother Nature versus actually just saying, how can we better plan and prepare for this?
I think agriculture is such a big topic that we may not be able to discuss exhaustively, but let me just comment and say, in Kenya, we have an issue. Like now, the meteorological department are telling us that tomorrow, Friday and Saturday and Sunday, we are likely to receive heavy rains across the country. So much water is going to waste, just as usual. Even when we have rains, prolonged ones, we don't harvest that water. Then what follows is drought, then lack of food. Like a few days ago, we received a report that slightly above 2 million Kenyans are facing starvation in future. We don't have enough food in our reserves. But having said that, also, it is not encouraging to be a farmer in Kenya. Let me say that first. I know it's not a good thing to say on TV, but it is not encouraging. You have to state the facts as they are. When you have a tea farmer being paid a bonus of 14 shillings from Kericho, from Kiambu, from Muranga, from Nyeri, and then now they are uprooting the tea leaves and everything else, where are we heading as a country? When we have the maize farmers complaining every day from Trans Nzoia, Kitale, Eldoret, they are complaining every day because of the low prices of maize. Then as a country, we are not even encouraging our citizens. I think people at the policy level in this country should focus on one thing. My friend has mentioned about youths seeing agriculture as business. But if I was at the policy making level, I would first focus on one thing: enough to eat. First, before you think of selling, can you first fill your stomachs? Let's start there, and then we go to selling.
Okay.
Because we can't be having a country where people are starving, and then we have the whole of Mount Kenya where people can do farming. We have Rift Valley, some very fertile pieces of land, but someone is in Mandera, someone in Wajir, someone in Taita Taveta is sleeping hungry.
Yeah.
I think there's not much to celebrate about this day.
Sure.
Yeah.
Very good points there. And I'd be happy to hear what you guys think about this discussion. Number one, if you're a young person watching this, do you feel like agriculture is a decent way to earn a living? Is it a place that you would be interested in getting, a sector rather that you'd be interested in getting into, perhaps even to forge a career on there, to find entrepreneurship opportunities there? Would you do it? 22999 is the SMS line, but also what you think about the state of food security here in Kenya, even as World Food Day is marked today. And I'm going to continue reading out some of those tweets as we go along with the show. But for now, let's jump into our core discussion, the reason you gentlemen are here, which is disaster preparedness and response in Kenya. Now, Kenya, just as any other nation, is prone to natural disasters and even accidents. Rarely does a day go by without hearing of a car accident, an injury, a certain facility is on fire, or in other instances, even floods or drowning. But how prepared from both an individual or societal level are we for disasters and tragedy? This is going to be the subject of our discussion here today on Viewpoint, Emergency Response and Preparedness. And so, before we even jump into that, is there any sort of difference between the terms disaster and tragedy? Or are they kind of just used, interchangeably?
I think they're used interchangeably, but there is a distinct difference between the two, and I'll give you a very simple example. It rains a lot. The rain comes into my house, destroys my furniture. It's a tragedy. It's not a disaster. Why? I have money to cope. Tomorrow I will be able to clean my house, replace my furniture. It's a tragedy. It's not a disaster. A disaster, in my view, is something has happened and I'm going to have a tough time coping and recovering from it.
Right. Okay.
So to me, that is what a disaster would be.
Okay. And overall, would you say that where do we rank, I guess, as far as disaster preparedness or emergency preparedness is concerned? If there was a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being good, where would you rank Kenya right now?
Wow.
Honestly.
Well, let's think about it this way. There are a myriad form of disasters, okay? We know the ones that come every year: drought and flood. We also know that we have conflict in this country. We also know there's time to time we have disease outbreaks. We have many different disease outbreaks. And where you'd rank us is depending on that particular disaster, okay? If you give us an average rating, maybe 5, maybe 6 out of 10. Some of the disasters you can say we are much better prepared for. Some of them we're not. When's the last time we had an earthquake in Kenya? We've had a few tremors.
Yeah.
So it's unfair to say we're not prepared for earthquake, which we're not. As a society, we did not anticipate it, and if it happens, then we'll be in a difficult position. So you give that a very low rating. But if you say, okay, in terms of drought, we're fairly doing something about drought as well. So it's difficult to say where we are, but I would say, do we have institutions and structures? We do. We do have them. Do we do what we're supposed to do all the time? Maybe not. But overall, when you travel around as well, you'll also see other countries that are much worse off than Kenya.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of the times we need to paint a picture of doom and gloom, and that's how we normally operate as Kenyans. We get up in the morning to hear the next bad thing, but the truth of the matter is we are not the best, but we are not the worst either. We are not doing
Solomon,
badly.
do you agree with these statements, and what would be your ranking?
I think I'm going to take a position on this one and say we are below average. That is somewhere below 5, between 1 and 4, but we are not past that. But I would also say it also depends on what kind of a disaster we are talking about. If you go case by case, we are going to get some cases where we were prepared, like the Dusit incidents. We had a very proper response from our men in uniform. And then when you compared with what had happened earlier at Westgate, then you can see there was an improvement. But overall, I maybe want to ask you with what most of our viewers can relate to. What happens when robbers visit our estates? How is the response? I'll tell you, we have systems that do not work in this country. If your child falls sick, you're supposed to have a hotline. You know, like they say, the police hotline and the ambulances, where you just dial and in the next 10 or 5 minutes,
There's a number, but does it even work?
Doesn't. Let me ask you a simple question, though I'm not supposed to ask you questions in this show. When you have an emergency in your house, like someone has fallen sick, do you call 999 or do you call friends and relatives? It's obvious who we call, but we're supposed to call government offices, and then they come and help. There should be an ambulance somewhere waiting, standby in that area. And then police vehicles. Sometimes you hear there are no fuel, there are no water. Just like we had a case in Mombasa at the ocean. We didn't have a standby speedboat. You know, suppose there was a speedboat and the car was sinking. Maybe the car would have sunk, but maybe not with the occupants. But there was nothing. Only people taking selfies and recording videos. That's how we have done. And then look at the people who came to even locate where the vehicle was. Came all the way from South Africa. This comes after we had an accident years ago and over 200 people died. Yet we are not prepared on that incident. In that very particular one, we are not prepared. Actually, we are zero. We are at zero. We outsourced almost everything. If locating a vehicle we couldn't manage, then leave alone saving the vehicle from sinking. So I think we are badly off in certain disasters, but like the case I mentioned, we are a little bit okay.
Okay.
But as a country, we are not prepared.
Right.
And the blame squarely lies with Kenyans.
Kenyans
I will
ourselves.
not say the government. There's something called, in governance, it's called social accountability. Social accountability is holding the office bearers accountable. They explain to us, because we give these disaster management people money every year, what do they do with this money? And it starts with our people, ranging from our county governments. See, you read today's dailies, you see MCAs are pocketing 25,000 per day. And people cannot ask them questions. Where are you taking this money? Where are you getting it from? Then come all the way to the national government. We give people money. We don't ask them, what are you doing with this money? And then when disasters strike, we cry all over. We are a crying nation.
How best should we ask these questions and hold to that social accountability? Because it's scary for a lot of Kenyans when they've tried to go out and say something. They've gone out for peaceful demonstrations, alafu unamwagiliwa tu tear gas
Social
na rubber
accountability.
bullets.
Social accountability starts at that very low level, at the ward level. When you see your MCA doing a hospital there, say for instance a dispensary, you must be able to know what is the cost of this dispensary and what you can see. If, for instance, they are saying the cost is 3 million and you can see 1 million, you're supposed to raise an alarm and say, I need to see my 3 million. Then come all the way to the top.
Right.
Ask that KFS guy, the Kenya Ferry Services guy, what do you do with the money you get from this service you give? Why don't you have a standby board? Why have you not resigned until now, even when you could not be able to save people who are sinking? Even when the following day, instead of updating us on what happened, you are busy telling us, you are busy advertising your services, instead of telling us where the mother and the child are. You know, the level of inhuman with some of these government officials. They don't take accountability when it is required of them to do so. But our Kenyans also are silent.
Very strong sentiments there, and we're going to take a short break as we come back to this discussion. But I'm posing that question to you guys as well. Where would you rank Kenya as far as disaster and emergency preparedness on a scale of 0 to 10? 10 being very good, 0 being not good at all. Where would you rank us as a country? Noting what we're hearing today, though, that in some areas we're good, others not so good, but also that ultimately there's also a responsibility to us as citizens, as the civilians, to take part in that. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we want to learn a bit more about what the Kenya Red Cross is doing and how they've been able to fit into this entire puzzle of disaster management and preparedness, but also how politics plays a role in disaster risk management. All that coming when we come back from this short break. Stay tuned. All right, guys, welcome back to Full Circle with Joyce, and I'm here with my guests in studio. We're talking about disaster preparedness, emergency preparedness and management here in Kenya. I have Ayaz Manji, who's the Director of Programs and Operations at the Kenya Red Cross, and also Solomon Kuria, who's an analyst, and we've been tackling this discussion with them since just before the break. Now, as we continue with it, of course, do remember you can send in your feedback to 22999. That's our SMS sign. You can also reach us on social media, on Instagram at SwitchTVKE, and on Twitter and Facebook at SwitchTV Kenya. And let me just read some of the comments that are here. Frank Omosh Ward Crispin on Facebook, you say disaster response bado Kenya tuko poa sana. Kamau Gitari wa Tumaini says, good morning Joyce and the team. Our government, particularly in disasters management, is surely wanting. They run when calamities occurred, but afterwards haya mambo yanasahurika. Something different needs to be done, and he of course is watching us from Venus Kinyozi apo Tumaini Nyandarua. Someone else says, or actually he had also added in on our earlier discussion, today being World Food Day Kenya, saying, I will support what Solomon Kuria is saying, that agricultural sector is very discouraging for young people to get into, and imagine what coffee and tea farmers are going through after a very hard and tiresome job. Nothing to show for our farmers. Asante sana for that comment right there. Again, do keep your feedback coming into 22999. Continuing on with our discussion though on disaster response and preparedness, we were just talking during the break, and I was saying how in Kenya, we just before the break, we had talked about that number, 999, which is supposed to be like our 911, the number that you call in case of an emergency. And the truth is, most people don't have that number. I don't even know if we were to call it now. I don't know if there's even like a ringtone or a dial tone that goes through. People usually call their friends, or you pass around the number of who is the area OCS, and everybody's looking for their personal cell number because we feel like you have to get into that level. And the other person that a lot of people, or entity that a lot of people then would try and reach out to, is the Kenya Red Cross.
Yeah, true.
And the Kenya Red Cross has sort of almost been the face of disaster or tragedy response in this country. And I mean, you guys are doing a great job at it, but where do you fit into all of this? And is that really how it's supposed to be?
Okay, so just let me clarify what Kenya Red Cross is. Kenya Red Cross is an organization that's formed by an Act of Parliament, Cap 256. So actually, if you go to the laws of Kenya, and anyone can go to the laws of Kenya, you can read what we are actually formed for and how we are formed. But we are formed to be auxiliary to both the central and the county governments.
Yeah, and auxiliary means?
And auxiliary meaning we are here to assist or to work with the government. And we are formed as an auxiliary to government to work in times of disaster and to alleviate human suffering. Okay, so this is where we come in terms of our legal mandate. So we would be mandated to act in any time of disaster, and we were to work with the government and the government machinery. Now, we talk about this number, I mean, okay, we have our own number as well.
Yeah, and you can share
I think
it
your
too.
viewers need to know that,
Yes.
if you need disaster services from Kenya Red Cross, you can call 1199. It's a toll-free number. It goes to our emergency operations center. We pick information. We get a lot of information every single day from every little car accident that takes place.
Yeah,
And then we use that to even activate our ambulance services,
okay.
which is on a part paid, part profit, part CSR framework, where
Right.
40% of our income comes from paying customers, but 60% of our work is done for people who are not even registered to
So
be
even
part of
if I have an and I'm
Anybody.
not registered,
Anybody.
or I
anybody.
can call and
That little
have
child you
service.
talked about today morning who was knocked out on Outer Ring Road, if somebody just called us on 1199, an ambulance would have reached there
Wow.
to try and assist that child. And this happens every single day.
Yeah.
On Mombasa Road alone, we probably respond to 10 or 15 accidents a day on that road.
Wow.
So this is what we do as Kenya Red Cross.
Okay. Solomon, let's touch a bit on the politics of this, but not really even the politics, but really the policy, because that's what we need.
Yes.
And there needs to be legislation supporting the infrastructure that is already in place, supporting the systems that are already in place, the institutions that need to be working on this. So maybe touch on that, and then I'll also give Ayaz a chance to comment on the same.
Yeah, legislation is an issue when it comes to disaster management. Like we had a chat off air, and squarely lies somewhere. We have a parliament. We have the National Assembly that can originate with any law in this country. But they choose to stay comfortable and not make a legislation to say who responds to what, how are they empowered. But don't be confused, because money is involved in emergencies. If you go to our budget kit this year, 2019-2020, there is money for emergencies. And you cannot predict emergencies. So that is money that is supposed to be there. So when such disasters arise, money is spent. But unfortunately, it is spent from each and every corner. So you cannot tell how much did this department spend, but they are going to have a report that we had this disaster and it was managed this way. Like what we had in Sinai, the Sinai Dam. Is it Sinai or what? Solai, not Sinai. Sinai was fire tragedy.
Yeah.
Solai was the dam.
The dam.
We had response from all over. NYS, KDF, county government, national government. So everyone had a report later that due to Solai tragedy, the county government of Nakuru spent these millions. NYS spent these millions. But if we had a kitty that if a county government want to spend some money on that tragedy, then it should be directed to this. Like we have World Bank coming to our country, they want to assist, but we direct them on where to put the money. There is no legislation, and that is a problem. Red Cross has been our savior. I must say this. They are our savior. In fact, you talk to many Kenyans all about they don't care so much about how issues are supposed to arrange themselves. People think that even Red Cross is part of government.
Actually.
Hata wakisema haki yetu watasema we also need Red Cross here because Red Cross is everywhere. There is a tragedy and they assist a lot.
Okay.
But on the part of government, there's a failure. There's total failure on legislation. And I told you, when you see such confusion, there's always people who benefit from confusion.
Okay, let's hold that thought there. Ayaz, talk to us about legislation and how important it is. What would this do for disaster preparedness and response here in Kenya?
Yes, I think this has been a discussion that has been going on in the country for a while now. We need a disaster management law. It has been drafted. It is in Parliament. It is yet to be passed. It would be important to have this law because, right now, as my friend here says, we have many disaster actors already on. So if you look at the national structures, you have the Ministry of Interior that takes lead in most disasters. You have the National Disaster Management Unit. You have the National Disaster Operations Center, NDOC. We have the National Drought Management Authority that comes for drought-related disasters. You have the Kenya Police. You have the Kenya Army. You have ourselves as the Red Cross. You have St. John's Ambulance. You have private security firms. You have, private hospitals as well. So disaster is many actors typically would come together to deal with a disaster.
But there needs to be that coordination.
How they come together, how they're led, how they're coordinated needs to be spelled out.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what a law is very important to do. And then the law would even manage to stipulate which institution has what powers to create or to respond to a disaster. So what you typically find right now is that, and let's be frank about it, nothing is more emotive than a disaster. Actually, if we all found there's a fire next door, we would all go to help because humanity is about helping somebody who is in need.
Right.
So disasters typically attract very many actors at the same time and even well-wishers, and that needs that important coordination. So it's important to get this law.
Sure.
Yeah, passed.
All right. As we wrap up, there's a very strong comment there by Beth Ndungu on our Facebook page saying, from experience and as a disaster management graduate, I can tell the entire world that disaster management, preparedness and response in Kenya, she puts it actually at a 0. Really harsh there, but saying I won't name the agency, but at one of these government agencies, you cannot be assisted at all. The staff there don't know anything about disasters and are unwilling to even assist in offering internships. How can one go for attachment in that office only to be given newspapers dated from the 90s to review disasters? Audit most of these staff in these offices and they will not be able to handle even the most basic situations. The situation is bad. And so I think just by that comment alone, the need for this legislation absolutely clear, because it would enable us even to put in place some of the best practices around the world. But I also do take your point that, even as Kenyans, we're human first of all, and these are our brothers and sisters. So whatever role that we can play first, and that begins even with just driving safely on Mombasa Road. And if you're pedestrian, use the pedestrian walkways. Just the little efforts that we can be doing to avoid those accidents as well would be very important. So thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of the show. I do appreciate your time. With that said, we're going to get ready for our second hour, and that's coming up next, where we're going to be focusing in on health and wellness here on Full Circle with Joyce. Stay tuned.